So ISIS has taken about a third of Iraq and has large portions of Syria as well. They were ascended and they were surging, and they went into places like Kobani. They were at a long extended fight. Now the U.S. has done bombings. I'm afraid that that is going to be counterproductive in some ways. But for the moment being, credit where credit is due. And we have seemed to stop some of their momentum. They did not get the town of Kobani. They had to retreat. And now it looks like Iraq and some interesting allies are planning to counterattack ISIS in some of the cities they've taken, including Tikrit. Tikrit, that used to be the home of Saddam Hussein, and obviously a Sunni stronghold in Iraq. Now, Iraq, of course, is majority Shiite, but there's a significant Sunni minority, and that Sunni minority has joined ISIS's fight in a lot of ways. Not all of them, but some of them, partly because of the resentment that they have against the Shiite government in Iraq. Okay, so now we go to one of their generals, Iraqi generals, who tells us what's happening. Brigadier General Saadman Ibrahim says, Tikrit has been besieged from 3 directions, from the north, west, and south, but what has remained only from the eastern side. So he's saying we're coming at Tikrit from every angle. I don't know what it is about Tikrit that people love to give directions about Tikrit. You remember Don Rumsfeld? This is what he had said about the weapons of mass destruction. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad, and east, west, south, and north somewhat. All I know is if I ever go to Tikrit, I really got to go north, south, east, and west. You got to watch all your directions in Tikrit. Okay, now, one of the reasons that it's been slow sledding here is because of minefields. ISIS has mined all the entrances to Tikrit in the east, west, south, and north. So the Iraqi army is having trouble getting in, but they have begun the counterattack and they are approaching. Now, meanwhile, ISIS, of course, continues to do their terror attacks, suicide bombings, and we have a description of one of them from the Associated Press. Already, a militant website affiliated with the Islamic State group has said an American jihadi carried out a suicide attack with a truck bomb on the outskirts of the nearby city of Samarra, targeting Iraqi forces and Shiite militiamen. The posting identified him by the nom de guerre of Abu Dawood al-Amriki without elaborating. Okay. These idiot Americans and Westerners that go to join ISIS, they think they're going to be cool and they're going to be, I don't know, the terrorist version of Braveheart, and they're going to be badass and they're going to shoot lightning bolts out of their arse. And, you know, we did the stories with sometimes the battery dies on their iPhone and they're like, oh man, I can't figure out where to plug it in. Dude, that's the least of your concerns. They're going to have you do things like this, suicide bombings. You know what happens after a suicide bombing? You die. Maybe in parlance you could understand, it'll say game over, okay? There's no going home, there's no nothing, there's no glory. There's just death. So that is also what's happening in Iraq. Now, one last part of this. This is very interesting. According again to the Associated Press, Iran's semi-official Fars news agency has reported that Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, the commander of the country's elite Revolutionary Guards Quds force, was taking part in the offensive. Interesting. So now let's understand the implications of that, and there are a couple. First of all, that means that we are partly working with the Iranians. Remember, America is bombing ISIS. We're opposed to ISIS. Iran is fighting ISIS. We agree on a common enemy, ISIS. We're helping the Iraqi army. The Iranians are helping the Iraqi army. We're on the same side. Now, we're not on the same side on everything, okay? And we wildly disagree with them on many things, their support of Hezbollah, their uranium program, etc., right? But here is an opening where maybe we can have constructive relationship. For example, we also wanted to fight al-Qaeda together in Afghanistan. And in the beginning of the Afghanistan war, Iran helped us with that. So that's great. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing when you can find common ground. And perhaps I could lead to common ground on the other issues you disagree on. Now, of course, neocons will see that and their heads will explode. But the reality is they made their own heads explode, because that's the second implication of this. What did we do? We went into Iraq and we said that everything was going to be great. We were going to go to the heart of where terrorism was, even though that's not where the heart of terrorism was. It was just a random Middle Eastern country that had a lot of oil that our oil companies would have liked. So Dick Cheney told us, don't worry, go into Iraq and we'll solve everything, okay? Now, what happened instead? One, out of the chaos that we created in Iraq, arose something called ISIS that's even worse than Al-Qaeda. Well played, neocons. So what did war bring you? It brought you an even worse monster. The second thing it brought you was, Iraq is mainly Shiite. Who are they going to work with most? The Shiite government next door in Iran. So what we did was we basically handed Iraq over to the Iranians. Now, Iran doesn't run Iraq, but they have a very close relationship, which is obvious and logical. They're both Shia countries right next to one another. You didn't think that through before the Iraq War? That perhaps the Sunnis would get even more militant when they were crushed by the Shia? And that they would get some radical group that would come out of that chaos of war? You didn't think that through. And then you didn't think, hey, when the Shia, which are the majority, win, and we help them win because we're pushing for democracy where the majority would clearly win, they would then be top allies with Iran, who we don't like. Oops. And Dick Cheney still has the nerve to show him his face on television and to argue that Obama doesn't know what he's doing. No one has ever known less about foreign policy than Dick Cheney. He has been an epic disaster, so have all of our neocons. And yet we still have conversations about whether to listen to these guys. They are epic failures. And you can see it in what has become of Iraq.